Hi everyone, and welcome back to our channel. Before we dive into today's emotional and inspiring story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss any of our heartfelt content. If you love real-life reflections, second chances, and stories that touch the soul, this one is definitely for you. Now, get comfortable, open your heart, and let's begin. The train doors slid open, and a gust of early winter air swept across Emily Harper's face as she stepped onto the platform at South Station, Boston. She held her daughter Sophie's hand, 10 years old now, as they descended into the familiar yet distant city. Boston hadn't changed much, still bustling and vibrant. But to Emily, everything seemed blurred behind a fog of time. 10 years, a third of her life. And today, she returned with a worn-out suitcase, a folder of documents, and a heart patched together by the last remnants of hope. Nathan had promised to pick them up at the station. Though they had been divorced for years, Emily hadn't expected him to actually come. She scanned the crowd, her heart a tangle of nerves, until she saw a tall man standing by a silver SUV she knew too well. Nathan Brooks, her ex-husband, hadn't changed much. He was still the calm man with gentle eyes and neatly trimmed black hair. Only now, there were more lines near his eyes and something softer in his gaze. "Hi," he said, his voice still the same, low and warm. "Let's get in the car, it's cold." Sophie shyly greeted her father and climbed into the back seat. Emily stayed quiet for a moment, then followed. They drove toward the city center. Outside the window, Boston was cloaked in a layer of nostalgic haze, so familiar it almost hurt. The apartment was in Beacon Hill, a place Emily had once dreamed of living when she was a student at NEU. Nathan stopped the car in front of the building. She got out, still trembling slightly from the cold, and from a quiet fear that she no longer belonged anywhere. "I've already rented this apartment for 2 years, paid in full," Nathan said, handing her a set of keys. 2 bedrooms, fully furnished. Sophie will have her own space." Emily stared at him. Why did you do this?" Nathan gave a soft smile. "You need a fresh start. This isn't for you. It's for Sophie. And maybe for everything we've been through." Her chest tightened. That simple sentence hit her deeper than he probably meant it to. The apartment was clean, cozy, bathed in natural light pouring in from a small balcony. Emily stood by the window, watching the busy street below, then turned to see her daughter hugging her teddy bear in the bedroom. Sophie beamed, a rare smile after so many months squeezed into the crowded house with her grandparents and uncles. Emily sat on the bed and sighed. She pulled a small notebook from her coat pocket, her journal of many years, and opened to a fresh page. Boston, the first day back. 10 years have passed like a dream. Sometimes a sweet dream, sometimes a nightmare. And now, all I want is to wake up. Memories rushed in. Her wedding day, the birth of her daughter, the day she signed the divorce papers. Emily remembered that winter day in 2015 when Nathan quietly drove her and Sophie back to her parents' home. She thought she'd stay for a few months, rest, and return. But months turned into years. She was pulled into a storm of responsibility, rebuilding her parents' house, paying for her brother's college, helping them find jobs, moving from one room to another. Her $150,000 savings dwindled through tuition payments, household expenses, and endless requests for a little more help. Then came the final blow. "You should move out, Em. This house is for Kyle and Dylan. You're a divorced woman. You need your own space." She had nothing left to hold on to. Her father's silence, her mother's coldness, her brother's sense of entitlement. It all marked the end of her decade-long sacrifice. That evening, Nathan called and invited them to dinner. In a cozy restaurant in Back Bay, Sophie joyfully devoured her pasta, while Emily ate slowly, each bite tasting like bittersweet memories. "I used to hate your mother," Nathan said suddenly. Emily froze, her fork midair. "Not because she was harsh," he continued, "but because she lived as if everyone around her was born to serve her. When I offered to help your parents open a shop so your dad could stop construction work, she called me nosy and disrespectful. That day, I knew our marriage would face storms." Emily couldn't speak. "But I never blamed you," he said, looking directly into her eyes. "I only regretted that you chose them over the family we were trying to build." She wanted to say something, an apology, an explanation, but her throat tightened. Some truths come too late to fix, but never too late to admit. She had made the wrong choice. That night, Emily sat alone on the balcony, watching the city lights reflecting off the Charles River. She thought of Nathan's words. "There are roads we must walk down to truly understand love, friendship, and family." Maybe he was right, and maybe what she had lost was more precious than anything. Not money, not the two-story house she built, but the man who had once loved her with everything he had, silently. She added a line to her journal. "Maybe it took me 10 years to come back to the place I truly belonged, not in a house, but in my own heart." The sound of birds chirping outside the Beacon Hill apartment reminded Emily of mornings back in the countryside. Except here, it didn't come with the smell of livestock or her mother shouting at someone in the kitchen. It was just quiet, a peaceful kind of silence that she hadn't known in years. She wrapped a blanket around herself, made a cup of coffee, and sat at the small dining table. Sophie was still sleeping. For the first time in a long time, Emily had a moment entirely to herself. But even in this peaceful bubble, her mind began to retrace the path that brought her here. After the divorce in 2015, Emily had returned to her childhood home in New Hampshire with a battered heart and a 3-year-old daughter. At first, she told herself it was temporary, a few months to reset, to be close to her parents, to regroup. But time, as it always does, took over. Her mother, Linda Harper, was a traditional woman who had long quit her job to be a homemaker. Her father, Richard, was a kind but quiet man who worked tirelessly in construction, despite being in his 50s. Emily's 2 younger brothers, Kyle and Dylan, were still in high school. When Emily arrived, Linda insisted they rebuild the house. "You and Sophie need your own space," she said. "We'll just build a small extension." Emily wanted to buy a small piece of land next door to build a modest home of her own, but her mother wouldn't hear of it. After weeks of nagging, she gave in. In 2016, construction began. What was supposed to be a 1-story addition turned into a 2-story expansion for the boys, her mother said. The total cost ballooned to over $100,000. Emily paid for it all. That was just the beginning. When Kyle and Dylan started college in Boston, Emily once again stepped in to help. At first, she planned to contribute a portion of their tuition and living expenses. But her father's modest income barely covered groceries, and her mother still didn't work. Soon, she was paying everything: rent, tuition, books, meals. Over the next several years, she spent more than $25,000 on each brother. She even helped them apply for jobs after graduation, using her own contacts and paying referral fees she never told them about. All the while, Emily and Sophie lived in a cramped room that she had personally renovated and furnished. She created a safe space with pastel walls, bookshelves, and fairy lights, Sophie's haven, and hers too. But as the years passed, the room stopped being theirs. When Kyle got married, he asked to use Emily's room because it's the biggest and has the best light. Emily was stunned. That room had been her sanctuary for nearly a decade. She hesitated, but didn't say no. Then, when Kyle's wife had a baby, they asked Emily to move again, this time into the back room with no windows and cracked paint. "It's cooler there," Kyle argued. "Better for the baby." Emily said no. For once, she stood her ground. But her mother sided with Kyle. "He has a child now," Linda said sharply. "You're being selfish. You've been in that room long enough." Emily was speechless. Sophie had changed rooms 3 times already. The little girl never complained, but Emily knew it hurt her, feeling like she had no place of her own. The final blow came 6 months ago. One morning, over breakfast, Linda casually mentioned that it was time for Emily to find a place of her own. "All of you kids are grown," she said. "It's time we think about dividing the property." Emily blinked. "Divide the property?" "Yes. This house belongs to Kyle now. He's the one with a family. The plot next door, Dylan will get that. You can have the back land. There's a small dirt path that leads there. You can build something there if you want." Emily could hardly breathe. She had poured everything, money, time, love, into that home. And now, She was being shuffled to a back lot like an afterthought. Later that week, she overheard a neighbor chatting with her mother. Divorced women, especially ones with a child, they're just a burden now. No man wants them. No value left. Emily didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just packed her things. She had about $22,000 left in her account. That was it. A decade of sacrifice had whittled her life down to that. And a daughter who looked at her and said, "Mom, can we just go back to Boston?" And so they left. They didn't announce it. No golonbis. No explanations. Emily took Sophie, boarded a train, and watched the green fields and small towns blur past the window. As they approached Boston, her heart pounded, not from fear, but something closer to clarity. She had given everything to a family who saw her as a wallet. She had buried her own dreams to help others succeed. She had denied herself love, space, and dignity, thinking it was the right thing to do. But all it did was erase her. Now, in the calm of her new apartment, Emily wrote in her journal, "They didn't take it from me. I gave it. I handed over my life in pieces, waiting for appreciation that never came. But maybe this is the beginning of something else. A place where I rebuild not for others, but for myself and my daughter." Just then, Sophie emerged from the bedroom, still in her pajamas. "Mom, what are we doing today?" Emily smiled and stood up. "We're going to buy some new curtains. And maybe a bookshelf." Sophie grinned. "Can I pick the color?" "Absolutely." As they walked out the door hand in hand, Emily felt something shift. The invisible walls she had lived behind for a decade were finally gone. Not because someone tore them down, but because she no longer needed to live inside them. The Boston Public Garden shimmered in the soft light of late autumn. Leaves crunched underfoot as Emily and Sophie walked beside Nathan along the winding paths. Sophie skipped ahead, chasing squirrels and pointing at ducks on the pond. For a moment, everything looked like it belonged in a picture-perfect postcard. A quiet morning, golden trees, a small family laughing softly. But Emily knew better than to believe in postcards. Reality always carried its own cracks beneath the surface. Nathan had invited them for a casual brunch and insisted on picking them up. Emily hesitated at first, unsure whether she was stepping into dangerous emotional territory, but seeing Sophie's excitement changed her mind. Now, as they sat down on a bench facing the water, Emily finally spoke. "Why did you wait at the station?" Nathan looked at her, a slow smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "I didn't wait. I just showed up." "You showed up with a 2-year lease on an apartment and groceries already stocked in the fridge," she replied, eyebrow raised. He chuckled. "Okay, maybe I waited a little." Emily stared out at the pond, letting the silence stretch before whispering, "Why?" Nathan took a breath, voice calm and quiet. "Because you needed someone to catch you this time." Those words hit her like a wave. For years, she had been the one catching others, her brothers, her mother, her father. She was the safety net no one thanked, the one who gave and gave until there was nothing left. And now, someone had caught her, without asking for anything in return. They ate lunch at a small cafe nearby. Sophie was busy coloring a paper placemat, while Emily and Nathan sat across from each other with a gentle awkwardness between them. "Do you remember," Emily asked, twirling a fork, "the day you drove me back to my parents' house after the divorce?" Nathan nodded slowly. "Of course I do. You didn't say much." "I didn't know what to say," he admitted. "I wanted to beg you to stay, but I knew you wouldn't. Not when your mother had already decided for you." Emily winced. She had always tried to deny that her mother's voice had such power. But looking back, it was clear as day. "She told me I'd regret staying married to you, that I was choosing the wrong family." "And you believed her," Nathan said gently, not with anger, just resignation. "I didn't believe her," Emily said, her voice cracking. "But I was tired. Sophie was still a toddler. You were working late. We argued over stupid things. And she made me feel like I had somewhere safe to go." Nathan looked down at his plate. "I wasn't perfect, Em. I know I worked too much. I know I got distant. But I never stopped loving you. Never." She looked up, tears stinging her eyes. "I know that now." After lunch, they took Sophie to the aquarium. Emily and Nathan walked slowly behind her, their shoulders brushing occasionally, silence laced with familiarity. Eventually, Emily asked what had been on her mind since the day she returned. "Why did you really stop liking my parents?" Nathan sighed. "It was never about liking or disliking. It was about watching the way they treated you." Emily blinked. "I remember the first time I visited your parents' house after we got married," he continued. "It was dinner time. Your dad came home exhausted from construction work. He barely spoke. Your mom sat there, criticizing the way he ate, the way he walked. Then she started on you, telling you how to raise Sophie, how to dress her, how to feed her." Emily remembered. That night, she cried in their bedroom. Nathan held her, quietly furious but helpless. "That same weekend," he said, "I suggested opening a small shop for your dad. Something close to home, something easy. I'd cover the cost." She called me a meddling, disrespectful outsider. Emily felt her face flush with shame. She said you were trying to separate her from her sons. Nathan laughed bitterly. "All I wanted was to help, to give her dad a rest. He deserved that much. He still works in construction," Emily murmured. "He never stopped." "I know," Nathan said. "And you took over where he left off. You became the silent provider." They reached the exit of the aquarium. Sophie ran toward them, her face flushed with excitement. That sea turtle was huge. Emily smiled and hugged her. "It was, wasn't it?" Nathan watched them with a softness in his eyes. "You've done a great job with her." "Really?" Emily felt a lump rise in her throat. "Thanks. It hasn't been easy." He hesitated, then added, "Do you ever think, what if?" She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "All the time." That evening, back in the apartment, Emily sat on the couch with her journal. "There's something tragic and beautiful about realizing your first home was in someone's heart, and walking away from it, believing you'd find a better one, only to return and see it's been quietly waiting the whole time." Nathan had remarried 2 years ago. He had a son now, a new life, and yet he had made space for her and Sophie without hesitation. Emily knew she wasn't here to disrupt anything. She wasn't hoping for a second chance. But the comfort of his presence, the sincerity in his voice, it brought something back to life inside her, a forgotten softness. She turned off the lights, walked into Sophie's room, and kissed her goodnight. As she closed the door, she whispered, "Thank you, Nathan, for still being there when I didn't even know I needed you." The next morning, Emily woke up earlier than usual. The sun had barely risen, but the city was already stirring. She walked barefoot to the window, hugging herself as the breeze slipped through the cracks. From her small apartment in Beacon Hill, she could see the distant skyline that once felt like a dream too far out of reach. And now, ironically, it was home again. She boiled water for tea, then sat at the kitchen table with her journal and opened it to a blank page. This morning, she didn't write. She just stared at it. Sometimes the silence said more than words ever could. That afternoon, after picking Sophie up from school, Emily took her to the park nearby. They sat on the swings, her daughter laughing beside her, and Emily thought, how did I end up here at 36, starting over with a 10-year-old and just enough savings to last a few months? The truth sat with her heavily. She had chosen to leave Nathan. She had chosen to go back home. But was it really her choice? In the early months of her marriage, Emily had fought hard to be a good wife and mother. Nathan worked long hours in tech, building the foundation for a startup, while she stayed home with baby Sophie, taking freelance gigs and doing most of the housework. Their life wasn't perfect, but there was love, simple, quiet love. Then came the stress. Nathan's hours became longer. Money got tighter. Emily's mother called almost daily, reminding her of how miserable she looked and how ungrateful Nathan was for not helping with her brother's tuition. At first, Emily defended him, but it chipped away at her, little by little, until one day, after a particularly ugly argument about spending Thanksgiving with Nathan's parents, she just broke. "I'm tired of choosing between you and them," she had said. "And I'm tired of being treated like the enemy," Nathan replied, voice flat. It wasn't a screaming match. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, too quiet. And in that silence, they drifted apart. Emily thought about all the things Nathan had done that went unnoticed. He made her tea when she was too tired to move. He kissed her on the forehead every morning, even when they were barely speaking. He offered to help her parents, financially, emotionally, even after being insulted. And most of all, he never stopped being a good father. But she hadn't seen any of that. Not clearly. Not back then. All she saw was a man who wasn't enough. Or maybe she was too blinded by the expectations of others to realize he already was. Later that evening, Emily received a call from her youngest brother, Dylan. "Hey sis," he said casually. "Mom wanted me to ask if you could send a little something for Kyle's baby's first birthday next week. You know, like a gift or help with catering. It'd mean a lot." Emily stared at her phone, stunned. She had moved out, quietly, respectfully, without drama. She hadn't asked for repayment, recognition, or even acknowledgement. But they still thought of her as a wallet. "I don't think I can help this time," she said softly. There was a pause. "Oh, okay. Well, I'll tell Mom." "No thank you. No how are you." Just click. She didn't cry this time. Instead, she sat back on the couch, looked at Sophie, who was on the floor drawing a purple cat, and whispered to herself, "I have nothing left to give to the people who never saw me." The next day, she met Nathan for coffee. She hadn't meant to. It just happened. They bumped into each other at the local bookstore. Sophie was delighted, and Nathan suggested a quick cup of coffee while she browsed the children's section. They sat by the window, the autumn light catching the dust in the air. "I had a call from my brother last night," Emily said, stirring her drink. Nathan looked up. "Everything okay?" "They wanted me to send money." "Again?" "For Kyle's kid's birthday." Nathan didn't say anything, just waited. "I said no," she continued. "For the first time, I said no." Nathan smiled gently. "How did that feel?" Emily let out a small laugh. "Strange. Free. Also a little sad." "You gave them everything," he said. "But you never gave anything to yourself. I thought that's what family was. Giving everything, no matter what." Nathan shook his head. "That's what martyrdom is. Family is supposed to give back, to hold you when you fall, not push you further down." Emily stared at her cup, quiet for a moment. "I'm not angry anymore," she whispered. "Just tired." Nathan leaned forward. "Then rest, Em. You've earned that." That night, after Sophie had gone to bed, Emily walked into the living room and opened a cardboard box she had left untouched since the move. Inside were photos, letters, a baby blanket, and a printed email from Nathan, the one he sent her the day their divorce was finalized. She unfolded it carefully. "I hope someday you find what you're looking for. I hope it's peace. I hope it's love. And if it's ever me, I'll be okay either way. Nathan." She read it 3 times. Then she folded it back and placed it at the bottom of the box. Tears welled in her eyes, but they didn't fall. She had cried enough. Tonight, she just wanted to breathe, to exist, without guilt, without debt, without trying to prove she was worth loving. She was done proving. She was beginning to understand. Sometimes the greatest cost of a choice isn't what you lose, but how long it takes you to admit that you lost it. Boston had begun to change colors. The last golden leaves clung to the trees, trembling in the wind. Winter was approaching, slowly but inevitably. For Emily, it felt poetic. Seasons always change, and this time she was ready. It had been 3 months since she moved back. Enough time for Sophie to settle into her new school. Enough time for Emily to start working again. Remote consulting for a financial firm, flexible hours, decent pay. The days were no longer heavy. She still thought of her family back in New Hampshire, but not with guilt anymore, just clarity. Sometimes distance was the only way to see things for what they truly were. She still talked to her dad, occasionally. He was quiet as ever, still working, still apologizing in silence through small gestures. But her mother and brothers? No contact, no calls, no texts. They hadn't asked where she'd gone. They hadn't offered a goodbye. Emily realized something crucial then. They never saw her as someone who could leave. She was the helper, the backup, the fallback plan, until she wasn't. One Saturday morning, Sophie came into her room with a big smile. "Can we go to the bookstore and then the museum?" she asked. Emily stretched, yawned, then smiled back. "Sure, get your jacket." As they walked through the city, hand in hand, Emily took in everything: the laughter of passersby, the aroma of roasting coffee beans from a nearby cafe, the street musicians playing violin near the corner. For once, it wasn't nostalgia that filled her chest. It was peace. That afternoon, as they left the museum, Sophie asked a question Emily hadn't expected. "Mom, are you and Dad going to get married again someday?" Emily knelt down and brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "No, sweetheart. Dad has his own life now. He's happy, but he still helps us, and he still smiles at you." Emily felt a warm ache bloom in her chest. "He does, because he's kind, because he cares about us, and because some people stay in your life even when the roles change." Sophie looked thoughtful. "So you still love him?" Emily paused. "I love who he was to me, and who he is to you. That's enough." And for the first time, she meant it. The next day, Nathan called to invite Sophie to his house for the weekend. Emily packed her things carefully, included Sophie's favorite pajamas and a new drawing she had made. At the door, Nathan waited with a gentle smile. His wife, Laura, waved politely from the car. Their toddler babbled in the back seat. "Call me if you need anything," Emily said, hugging Sophie tightly. Nathan met her eyes. "She'll be fine, and so will you." Emily smiled. "I know." He hesitated. "Are you happy?" She took a breath. "I think I'm becoming. That's better than happy." He nodded, understanding completely. That evening, the apartment was quiet. Too quiet. Emily made tea, curled up on the couch, and opened her journal one last time. There are moments in life when you realize no one is coming to save you. That's when the saving begins. I used to believe sacrifice was the highest form of love. But now I believe boundaries are. I used to believe family was blood. But now, I believe family is anyone who sees you and still chooses to stay. I used to believe love had to last forever to be real. But now I believe it just has to be true, even if only for a time. I'm not starting over. I'm just finally starting as me. She closed the journal, exhaled, and turned off the lamp. The next morning, she made pancakes for herself, blueberry, just the way she liked them. She played her favorite records. She watered the plants on the windowsill. She danced barefoot in the kitchen, laughing at her own clumsiness. When Sophie returned later that day, she ran into her mother's arms. And Emily whispered, "We're home. Not in a borrowed room. Not in someone else's expectations. But here, in this little apartment, in this chapter of their lives, in a world she finally chose for herself."